What I am about to play for you is important that you hear. It's not out there like it should be. So I am going to take my satellite radio subscription and put it to good use, and we are going to listen to the Bill Madden interview talking about how Scott Boras is the one who blew up the deal, that deal that late into the night at 2:45 in the morning when they separated, and then they went back the next day, and the tone had changed, and the players were saying no, the tone hadn't changed. It's from the owners. This all just, it didn't smell good. We've had now over 24 hours to digest what happened. We're going to listen to Bill Madden. I'm going to push play and stop talking because you're here to listen to the interview. Again, this is Bill Madden, Hall of Fame writer, talking about the situation, Scott Boras basically blowing up the deal that looked like we were headed towards. So I'm going to push play, and we're going to go.
Bill, you sent me, I'm not going to read it because I want you to highlight it. You sent me a very interesting text today that was long. You've been following this forever. You've been following labor stuff since Marvin Miller. Why don't you tell the audience the essence of what you sent me here this morning about 10 o'clock? Let me hear.
Okay. Well, let me preface this, Dog, by saying that this information that I have is gleaned from not only owners, but also 2 or 3 agents who are deeply involved in these negotiations as well. So I'm getting this from both sides, okay?
Okay.
So the easy target in all of this is Rob Manfred, and that's understandable. I think we all agree he hasn't been the greatest of commissioners, and he walks around with this perpetual look of arrogance on his face throughout these negotiations, I might add. But the real problem in these negotiations and the real villain was Scott Boras, and I will list the litany of things that were agreed to and that Scott Boras proceeded to blow up. So let's first start with what was agreed to, or essentially agreed to as of yesterday. The owners had agreed to raising the minimum raise from $550,000 to $700,000. Now, think about this. That represents about a third of all the players. That's a big chunk of all the players. That they turned down. That's part of what they turned down. The second part of what they turned down. The owners removed the draft pick penalties for teams signing free agents that have been offered a qualifying offer. Think about that, Chris. That is a huge give by the owners. A huge gain for the players. No more penalties if a team they don't have to worry about teams being penalized for signing a player that had been given a qualifying offer. That's out. Then they came up with this bonus pool. This was a player's idea. They wanted to create a bonus pool for all the pre-arbitration players. And that money would be divided up for all these pre-arbitration players to help them get a little bit more money than before they got to arbitration, the Super Twos, so to speak. Think about this. This is found money for the players. This pool, this money did not exist before, and yet the owners agreed to it. The players originally came in wanting $85 million in this pool, and they wind up agreeing on $25 million. When I say agree, nothing is agreed upon until it's signed. But these were the terms of what they thought was going to be the basis of an agreement yesterday or Sunday. So then you have then it came down to before I get to the CBT, the competitive balance tax, the players also turned down a 14-team postseason. Now, we would automatically cheer for that because it's a terrible idea to have almost half of baseball making the postseason. I think we all agree on that. But they turned it down for the wrong reasons. They turned it down because they looked at it as a disincentive for both the large market teams to spend more to get into the playoffs, and the small market teams would be in turn just sit around and wait in their minds until they got close to the postseason or the trading deadline or whatever before they would spend some money. But meanwhile, they spend half the year not spending money. So that was why they turned this thing down. So instead of commending them for turning it down, I don't think we can go there because it was the wrong reasons for turning it down. Anyway, it's going to be a 12. It was going to be a 12-team postseason, and then you got to the fact that now all of this was agreed to, pretty much agreed to, until the only thing they hadn't finalized was the competitive balance tax, and that was what they were going to work on yesterday. Now, the competitive balance tax, the owner's proposal was to raise it from 210 to 220 for the first 3 years. But in addition to that, and this has not been really widely written or whatever, they also agreed to remove the increased tax penalties from the previous agreement. Remember, they put in some increased taxes the last couple of years that were egregious. I mean, they removed them. And so, but Boras is only interested in wanting to get that thing as high as he could, because obviously he's the one that benefits the most, because he has these high-end free agents that get, if the owners are unencumbered, they'll pay him whatever he wants. It's just raising the thing. But here's the problem. The players have been convinced that this is in fact a
bad deal.
What am I saying? It's a cap. I'm sorry. The players are looking at this as a cap. But here's the thing. If this is a cap, then why have 8 teams gone over this in the last few years? The Red Sox, the Yankees. Last year, the Padres went over it. So how can they call this a cap when all these teams and this year, I mean, Cohen's already blown by whatever they're going to have this year. So, I mean, that's another misconception here. And as a matter of fact, so the owners are trying to keep this thing, they would not like to see this thing raised so that everybody can become a Cohen on this thing. So they're trying to keep it. They did propose to raise it slightly to 220, and then I think it increased. They were going to increase it by 2026. It would get up to 230. So this is what they were finalizing the deal on, getting the numbers on this competitive balance. Boras comes into this thing yesterday and says, no, the whole deal is off. He's got Meyer in his corner. Meyer is the main the players,
right, the negotiator. Yep,
the chief negotiator for the players, and of course his emissary is Max Scherzer. They tell me that Max Scherzer was a complete out of control maniac during these negotiations, coming in screaming at everybody, losing his temper, and with all these crazy demands coming from Boras on this deal. Boras's idea
Heard that too about Max.
Was to blow up the entire previous basic agreement and try to and get a whole new one. And let's face it, the owners, we all know the players signed a bad deal 5 years ago, but you can't get all of that back. And the fact of the matter is, did anybody put a gun to their head 5 years ago? No. They signed a bad deal because they were more interested in things like gourmet meals on the planes, more days off, and all this other extra stuff that had nothing to do with the financial aspect of the game. And so that's why they're in this spot to begin with.
All right, 2:35 in the morning on Tuesday, they were close to a deal. Why did they stop? Why did they go home that night?
Because Boras came into the thing on Tuesday. He came into the thing. Well, I don't know if he was personally there. He sent Scherzer in as his emissary and said, no, this deal is no good. He blew up the whole deal. Everything
at 2 o'clock.
Everything they had agreed upon.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, he blew it. He told him to go home. We'll talk about this tomorrow.
No, this was going on during the day. Boras and Scherzer and these players, they're all drinking the Boras Kool-Aid. I feel sorry for these younger players in the game. They were looking at a huge raise in the minimum salary. I mean, think about that. What a bad look that is right now in this country, where so many people in this country are suffering between the inflation, gas prices, and everything else, and the economy going south. And here you have ball players turning down a minimum salary of $700,000. I mean, this is insane. This whole thing is insane.
How do the other players, Bill and Tony Clark, how do they allow this to happen?
Well, they allowed it to happen because the player reps are all mostly Boras players, and they all agreed that this is a bad deal, and they're not going to sign it. So, I don't know. I mean, who knows how all the Latin players feel that are sitting down there in Venezuela and the Dominican Republic and Mexico waiting for their visas, wondering, and how about the 300 unsigned free agents? What are they thinking right now? And I'm getting this from the agents who represent a lot of those guys. The agents are furious about this thing.
Where do we? So Scherzer, I'm interested in him. He wasn't involved in the pandemic negotiations. Since when has Max Scherzer become Samuel Gompers? I don't understand. When did this occur?
Well, that's a good question, and I said the same thing to myself the other day. Well, he's Boris's representative. Boras tells him, go in there and tell him you want this, tell him you want that, and so that's what happens. And Scherzer, they tell me his behavior in this thing was just abhorrent to everybody. He was just out of control. And here's the other thing, interesting. You may remember, I think it was Saturday when they made all the progress and it looked like something might get done on Sunday.
Right.
Well, Saturday was the one day that Scherzer wasn't part of the negotiations. He sat out that day or somewhere else. He wasn't part of this day. I don't know if that's coincidence.
So the one day they made progress, Scherzer wasn't in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, how close in your eyes were they to a deal on Monday night at 2:30 before they left for the day and resumed the next day?
On Monday night?
Yeah, because don't forget, they met Monday night for 17 hours. They left at 2:30 and came back yesterday at 11. So when they left at 2:30, I'm assuming Boras wasn't there. When they left at 2:30, how close were they, in your eyes, to getting a deal?
Well, the people I talked to, and again, this is not just owners. These were a couple of agents as well. They were optimistic. They were not sure, but they were optimistic that they were close enough that they would be able to get a deal, simply because the only thing that was totally unresolved was what was going to be the competitive balance tax. And I think they felt that even though the players' numbers were way up there, I forget what the players were looking
245,
at.
245. Yeah, it starts at 245.
And the owners were at 220. So I mean, it's pretty easy if you're trying to compromise. How you could compromise on those numbers? It's not like they were a gulf apart. And that's the other thing. I don't know if Manfred. I was told that Manfred told the players when he had his face-to-face with the players. He tried to explain to them that, look, this is a labor negotiation. There are no winners and losers in player negotiations. Nobody gets everything they want, and nobody gets nothing that they want. There's no winners or losers. But the only way to get it done is by compromise. And the players, it looked like they were compromising on all of these different issues. I just went through them with you. But then Boras came in and said, no, we're not doing any of this stuff. And that's why they're so upset.
Now, Boras is going to deny this. I'm sure he might even hear this interview. Somebody will post it, and he'll go nuts. So what does he know? He's an owed this. He's an owed that. Right. Russo always hates the players. He is going to do that. So it's going to be basically, some word against Boras, and Boras has got a lot of clout. What would your response be to that?
I've been going head-to-head with Scott Boras for 30 years, dog. I'm not worried about what he's going to say because, look, I know that this is true. I mean, like I said, this is not coming just from the owners. I suggest, I would tell Boras, talk to some of the other agents, see if they agree with you that this deal should have been turned down.
Now, Manfred could not raise that competitive tax any higher than 220 because he was not going to get those small market teams to agree. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, they had, their proposal was going to get it up to 220, up to 230 by the end of the agreement.
Yeah, but that's 5 years down the road. The 220, which they were firm on, the Pirates, the Royals, the Indians, the Marlins, teams like that, who are obviously always worried about their money, they are not going to necessarily. They're not going to ratify it. So he's got to get 23 votes. So how much did that come into play as far as the competitive tax number goes?
From the best of my knowledge, he had the votes for the deal that I just went over with you. He had the votes for it.
No, but if he was over 220, he didn't have the votes, correct? With the competitive tax?
Well, I think for next year, yeah. I mean, that's why they did it the way they did it. 220, 220, 220. The first 3 years of the deal, they weren't going over 220. Only the back end of the deal.
Were they going over?
Where do we? They were on board with that.
Where is the resolve now? Let's do the resolve first. Where is the owner resolve, Manfred included, after this disaster yesterday?
Well, I think we're back to square one. This is another thing that's kind of a misconception on all of this. The players have been maintaining that the owners wouldn't even talk to them for the first 6 weeks of the lockout.
That's ridiculous. That's not true.
Well, it is ridiculous because for the first 6 weeks of the lockout, the Boras-led negotiators refused to come off of 5 years for free agency and 2 years for Robert. They refused to come off of that. And Manfred told them from the very beginning, that's a non-starter for us. And that's why there was no negotiations, because they wouldn't come off that.
100%. Yep. Now, where do we stand, again, with owner resolve here on March 2nd?
Well, I think on March 2nd, I think the owners are taking the attitude that we've gone home. If you want to get back to us, get back to us. But they're not going to call the players. They're not going to negotiate against themselves. They've made their offer. The players have said no to it. So it's up to the players to come back to them and say, well, look, maybe we can tweak a couple things here and get an agreement. And maybe the players will understand that, Oh, and that was the other thing. I mean, they're saying that the owners are just swimming in money. Well, they are, and they will be certainly down the road. But they don't take into consideration over the fact that the owners lost millions during the pandemic. Remember, they canceled half a season of games. And then after that, the games that they did have were played before empty crowds. So Boras doesn't take that into consideration. He just thinks the owners have all this money. And so that's the, that's the answer to all of this. Just let the owners keep spending.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, if the players don't come back with some sort of proposal, where are we going to be?
I'm sorry, what?
If the players don't come back, Bill, with some sort of proposal, where are we going to be?
Well, we're going to be nowhere. And, it's up to the players now because the owners are not going to come back with anything. They don't want to cancel games, but they're going to have no choice. They don't have an agreement. And, they're talking about how he's only canceled 1 week of games. Well, this is going to keep going on, dog. I mean, we could be seeing, it won't be long before the entire month of March is gone.
Month of April, right. The month of April, first week.
Well,
the
month of March as far as anything happening.
In spring training, right. Last thing, Bill, why have your brethren, your writers, you're the only one, there is not a writer on this earth that I have read, whether it's online, in newspapers, that even tries to be fair and doesn't go out there and harpoon Manfred and the owners. There is not one of your brethren who goes out there and at least tries to say, hey, guys, you know what? All right, Manfred's this, Manfred's that. Let's be fair. These players are lost here, too. I haven't read that anywhere. How come?
Well, maybe that's because they have the relationship with Scott Boras that I don't have.
So you're saying that their relationship with some of the agents, some of the players, and the big agent in Boras has colored their bias, has hurt them with they're not unbiased because of that? That's the deal? Colored their perception?
Like I will only say that I would venture to say that a lot of their information is coming from Boras. They talk to Boras every day. And, and Manfred's an easy target. And I'm not saying he isn't to blame here. Everybody's to blame here. But I'm just saying what broke down these negotiations was Scott Boras. It wasn't Rob Manfred. And I just pointed out all the gives that ownership management gave on this contract. And for some reason, nobody wants to point any of that stuff out. It's like they've been hardlining the players from day one, and they haven't given it a single thing.
Last thing.
This was a good deal for the players, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree with you more. Who is the one guy on that player board right now who's got some reasoning about him and he's got some rationality about him who's going to be able to convince everybody, guys, we got to take this deal? Who's the guy?
I don't think there's anybody because they're mostly all Boras clients, and they all voted unanimously to turn it down because I don't think they realize what they've turned down here and what they're not going to get.
Yeah. Wow. So your best guess opening day is when?
That's a good question. The way things are right now, if the players don't go back to the owners and try to undo all this, what they did yesterday, we could be looking at May 1st, and we could be looking at maybe no season at all.
You wouldn't rule that out, no baseball at all. You would not rule that out.
Well, I can tell you this, the owners aren't going to crack on this thing. That I know. The owners are not going to crack on this thing. Boras is counting on them cracking because in his individual negotiations with him with players, they always do crack. He always finds the one dumb owner that gives him everything he wants.
I agree. This is nasty. Bill, great job. Thanks for the help today. It's nasty. It's going to be rough. Always a pleasure, Bill. Keep up the good work. Appreciate it very much here today.
All right, so that is everything. Now, listen, you probably listen to that and you think that's very owner-friendly, heavy information there, and maybe some of it is. But the fact of just get the information out of it, take this, Bill, obviously is sort of looking at this from a perspective where everyone's jumping on the owners, everyone's jumping on Rob Manfred, and there's others to blame. And that is the point that he's trying to get across. That's the point you should get from this, that there are other demons at work here, and the big one is Scott Boras. Just some notes for anybody that might be clicking around, kind of jump to the end to see what the recap might be. Listen, we were live on Monday night until they finally broke at that 2:45, 3 o'clock in the morning. So everything they talked about that it looked like they were working on, we were there, we were getting it, we were talking about it. So everything that he talked about that the deal was looking to be, we were experiencing it. Those of you that were with me live, and if you were with me live, the video's still up. So we knew all of that was going on. And then the next day, players saying, no, that the owners want us to lose money. Right? That if you want to say that the tone had changed, there's your evidence. Now, Tuesday was supposed to be, he talked about the day that they hammered out the CBT, that they had come to an agreement on the minimum salary. The point, listen, the minimum salary is going from $550, $570 up to $700,000 with this deal, and that's for a third of the players. That's a lot of money, okay? We're talking about trying to get an extra $10 million with the CBT. We're talking about trying to get as much money as we can for this for this arbitration bonus pool. To get $1 on that arbitration bonus pool, every dollar over zero is a 100% increase. Listen, I'm not a mathematician. I never claimed to be, but you get my point. It was 0 before, and they were up to 25. They could have gotten it to 40 if they did the playoffs. And we understand we're fine with the holding ground there on 12, but they had worked that out. There was the A or the B, and they went with the A. That was that night. Remember that all of that seemed to magically disappear on Tuesday. The other agents he talks about, other agents are angry. We're not hearing about our other agents. We are hearing that the players are presenting a unified front. You can't have someone step out, look like a scab, ruin the whole thing. So they're trying to get everything done. Obviously, Max and Andrew and Tony and everyone's are filtering down to everybody else that we've got a plan. Don't worry. So you're not going to have anybody stepping out because they're going to believe in the process. They're going to trust the process, believe in the plan. But other agents certainly are angry. Unsigned free agents certainly probably wonder, what am I going to get? I got to get in there. I got to get paid. And the players who are working on the minimums are looking at, trying to get a pretty substantial increase. So they're all sitting out there now waiting. Other agents probably angry. Max Scherzer, I had heard about that Max Scherzer was difficult during the negotiations, and it would make sense if that was tied in to Scott Boras. Now, this is from Bill Madden. Bill Madden is a Hall of Fame writer. He is the only one out there saying this, and he's saying it on SiriusXM. He's not able to get a spot on ESPN or Fox Sports or anywhere to get, he's not showing up on Buster Olney's podcast or John Heyman's podcast to talk about this. Nobody is talking about this, which is interesting that he couldn't get on MLB Network to talk about this, because this is an owner-friendly conversation right now. And again, I know that might be hard for some to digest, because you want to place 1,000% of the blame on the owners. Listen, if we have Scott Boras pulling the strings here, we have an issue. We have an outside party. If you are for the players, like I am for the players, to get their money, you should be mad at Scott Boras with this information. I believe that the players the minimums are going up. The minimums are going up, and it's close to what it was before. Or not what it was before. It's close to what they wanted. We're off by about $25,000, and then we're off by a $10,000 increase per year, because it was going to go up 10 per year. But still, I mean, the owners had come up big time. The draft pick for the qualifying offers, that going away was a big win for the players. So listen, the players were getting a lot here, and it just, Scott Boras wants that CBT to go up as high as it can, because what that means is, when his clients that are getting the big payday, they'll get more money, he'll get more money. It's an indirect thing. Now, he might not be presenting it that way, and maybe in Scott Boras' own mind, he's convinced himself that's not what he's doing. But at the end of the day, if we're trying to get the CBT up to what the players want, instead of 220 up to 240, then what we're doing is we're trying to get more Max Scherzer type contracts, is what we're trying to get. That's the point. And who benefits from that? You know the answer to that. The CBT, the 220 to 240, you can negotiate that. You could have figured that out in one day. And I understand that the players, they have to make up ground. They feel like they have to make up ground from a bad deal that they signed the last negotiations. I get that. You're making major steps with that, with the increase in the minimum salary, with all of a sudden $25 million for a bonus pool, found money. All right, that was zero before. All of a sudden, $25 million, found money. It wasn't there before. You're making steps to fix a bad deal that you signed back the last negotiation, and you can't get it all back in one shot. This is something that you got to work on at this negotiation period, and then you know what? You tell yourselves, in 5 years we'll go back and we'll get the rest of it. We'll get the minimums up to $900K. We'll get that bonus pool from 25 to 60, whatever. This is a process. I'm a little, I want a deal done. End of the day. Pointing fingers. Let's get a deal done. Can we get Scott Boras out of the equation? Probably not. But this was information. This was a story that needed to get out there. I want to use my platform, my voice, you guys, BALLCAP Nation, to get this out there to more people, because it needs to be out there, because it's just not resonating like I believe it should. We don't have Rosenthal or Nightingale. You figure Nightingale would run with this, or Passan, or any of them running with this story. I'll trust the word of a Hall of Famer, of a lifer in Bill Madden. So that's the story. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Share this. Spread the word. More noise needs to be made. I feel like we just need to make some noise about this, and that's why I'm putting this out there for you guys to consume, to hear, to share, to spread, whatever. That's the deal, everybody. Let's hope that this thing gets resolved soon. Thank you for watching the video. I do appreciate it. I will add some links to some of my other content for you to check out here. Now, as always, thank you for spending some time with the channel. Thank you for watching the video.